Hi, this is Mia. Today, I want to talk about something very personal. I want to share the things I really wish I knew before I started learning English. When I first began learning English, I thought I was doing everything right. I studied grammar, I memorized words, I watched lessons. But now, looking back, I realized something important. I was busy, but I was not improving. The first thing I wish I knew is this: you don't need to understand everything. At the beginning, I stopped all the time. When I heard a word I didn't know, I paused the video. I checked the dictionary. I tried to understand every single sentence. And honestly, this made learning very slow and very tiring. I didn't know that my brain could learn naturally, just like children learn their first language. Now I know something very different. If you understand 60 or 70%, that is already enough. Your brain can guess, your brain can connect ideas, and your brain can learn without translation. Another thing I really wish I knew earlier is this: grammar is not the most important thing. I spent so much time learning rules, past simple, present perfect, conditionals, but when someone asked me a simple question like, "How was your day?" I froze. I knew the grammar, but I couldn't speak. I didn't know that speaking is a skill, not knowledge. You don't learn to speak by reading rules. You learn to speak by speaking, even if it's slow, even if it's wrong. I also wish I knew that making mistakes is not a problem. I was afraid of sounding stupid, afraid of saying something wrong. So many times I stayed silent, and silence never helped my English. Now I understand something very clear. Every mistake is a step forward. When you make mistakes, it means you are trying, and trying is the only way to improve. One more thing I really wish I knew before learning English is this: you don't need motivation, you need habits. I waited for motivation. Some days I felt excited. Some days I did nothing. But language learning doesn't work like that. 10 minutes every day is better than 2 hours once a week. A small habit can change everything. Listening while walking, listening before sleeping, talking to yourself for 1 minute. These small things feel simple, but they are powerful. If I knew these things earlier, I would be much kinder to myself. Learning English is not a race, it's a journey, and everyone moves at a different speed. This is only the first part. There are more things I wish I knew, and I will share them with you next. One of the hardest parts of learning English was comparing myself to other people. I often watched videos of people speaking English fluently. They sounded confident, they sounded natural, and every time I asked myself the same question: why am I not like them? I didn't understand that I was only seeing the final result. I was not seeing the years of practice, the mistakes, or the fear they had at the beginning. Everyone learns at a different speed. Everyone has a different background. When I compared myself to others, I felt smaller, I felt slower, and those feelings made learning much harder than it needed to be. Another important thing I wish I knew earlier is that my accent is not a problem. For a long time, I tried to hide it. I wanted to sound perfect. I wanted to sound like a native speaker. Because of that, I spoke less. I stayed quiet even when I knew the answer. But an accent is not a weakness. It is proof that you learned something new. Being understood is more important than sounding perfect. Clear English is always better than perfect English. I also believed that confidence should come first. I thought I needed to feel confident before I could speak. But confidence does not come before action, it comes after. I started speaking even when I felt nervous, even when my sentences were not perfect. Slowly, something changed. Speaking became easier. The fear became smaller. Another thing I wish I knew is that feeling uncomfortable is part of learning. Learning English often felt strange. My brain felt tired. My mouth felt slow. I thought something was wrong with me. But now I understand that this discomfort is a sign of growth. Growth is not comfortable. Growth feels confusing, and that is completely normal. One thing I truly did not understand at the beginning is how important listening is. I focused too much on reading and grammar. I believed that if I studied enough rules, speaking would come naturally. But speaking never came. I didn't realize that my ears were not trained. I could read English, but when someone spoke, the words felt too fast and unclear. I thought the problem was my level. I thought English was just too difficult for me. What I didn't know is that listening is a skill you must practice every day. You don't learn listening by doing it once a week. You don't learn it by understanding every word. You learn it by hearing English again and again, even when you don't fully understand it. I also wish I knew that repeating the same content is not boring but powerful. Before, I always searched for new videos, new podcasts, new lessons. I thought new content meant better learning, but my brain was always starting from zero. Nothing stayed long enough to become familiar. When I finally listened to the same podcast many times, something changed. The words felt familiar. The sentences felt lighter. I stopped translating in my head all the time. Another thing I wish I understood earlier is that speaking alone is not strange. I waited for someone to practice with me, a friend, a teacher, a partner. Most of the time, no one was available, so I did nothing. I didn't know that speaking to myself could help so much. Talking in front of the mirror, describing my day out loud, repeating sentences I heard. These small habits helped my mouth get used to English. At first, it felt uncomfortable. I felt silly. But slowly, my mouth moved faster. The pauses became shorter. I also wish I knew that thinking in English takes time. I was angry with myself because my brain was slow. I wanted fast answers. I wanted natural sentences. But your brain needs repetition to change its habits. Thinking in English is not a switch, it's a process. And the more you listen and speak, the more natural it becomes. I spent a long time believing that I was bad at languages. Now I know that I was just not using the right methods. Progress is quiet. Sometimes you don't feel it. But one day, you understand more. You speak a little faster, and you realize that learning was happening all along. Another thing I really wish I understood earlier is how much pressure I put on myself. I believed that learning English should be fast. I believed that if I was not fluent in a short time, I was failing. Every slow day felt like a waste. Every mistake felt like proof that I was not good enough. I didn't know that language learning is full of ups and downs. Some days feel easy, some days feel impossible, and both are normal. I also wish I knew that taking breaks does not mean giving up. When I felt tired, I felt guilty. I thought stopping for a day meant I was lazy. But rest is part of learning. Your brain needs time to process new sounds and ideas. Sometimes improvement happens quietly, during rest. Another thing I wish I knew is that understanding English is not the same as using English. I understood many words. I understood many sentences. But when I tried to speak, my mind went blank. I didn't know that passive knowledge and active skill are very different. To turn understanding into speaking, you must use the language, slowly, repeatedly. Even short sentences matter. Even simple thoughts matter. I also wish I knew that learning English can change how you see yourself. When I couldn't express my thoughts, I felt smaller, less confident. But as my English improved, my voice became stronger. I realized that English was not just a language, it was a tool to share ideas, a tool to connect with people. And that realization changed my mindset. I stopped asking, "Am I good enough?" and started asking, "Am I improving?" That question changed everything. One thing I really struggled with was consistency. I believed that learning English meant studying hard for long hours. When I couldn't do that, I felt like I was failing again. I didn't understand that consistency is not about intensity. It is about showing up, even on small days. Some days I had energy. Some days I didn't. On low energy days, I often did nothing. Now I know that doing a little is always better than doing nothing. Even 5 minutes matters. Listening to one short audio, reading one simple paragraph, saying a few sentences out loud. These small actions keep the connection alive. I also wish I knew earlier that motivation comes and goes. I waited for motivation to learn. When I felt motivated, I studied. When I didn't, I stopped. But motivation is not reliable. Habits are. When learning becomes part of your routine, you don't need to feel excited every day. You just continue. Another important thing I wish I knew is that confusion is not failure. There were many moments when English felt messy in my head. Words mixed together. Rules felt unclear. I thought I was going backward, but confusion often comes before clarity. Your brain is reorganizing information. It is trying to make sense of patterns. That uncomfortable phase is part of real learning. I also wish I knew that progress is not always visible. Some weeks, nothing seems to change. You still make the same mistakes. But suddenly, one day, you understand a sentence without effort. That moment is the result of many invisible hours. I learned that patience is not waiting without action. It is continuing even when results are slow. Learning English taught me how to be patient with myself, and that lesson stayed with me, even outside language learning. Another thing I deeply wish I understood earlier is how much my mindset affected my progress. I often told myself quiet sentences that I didn't even notice. I'm not good at languages. English is too hard for me. These thoughts felt normal, but they were heavy. Every time I sat down to study, I already expected failure. I didn't know that your brain listens to how you talk to yourself. When you believe something is impossible, your actions become smaller. You try less. I also wish I knew that perfectionism slows learning. I wanted perfect sentences, perfect pronunciation, so I waited, and waiting stopped my progress. When I finally allowed myself to speak imperfect English, I learned faster. Mistakes became information, not shame. Another thing I wish I knew is that learning English is emotional. Some days I felt proud. Some days I felt frustrated. Language is connected to identity. When you can't express yourself, it hurts more than you expect. I learned that it is okay to feel these emotions. Ignoring them only makes learning heavier. I also wish I knew that progress doesn't always feel like success. Sometimes progress feels like struggle, showing up when you don't want to, trying again after a bad day. That is real progress. Learning English taught me resilience, It taught me how to continue even when confidence is low, and that lesson changed how I face challenges in general. One last thing I truly wish I knew before learning English is that this journey changes you slowly, and then all at once. For a long time, I felt stuck. Day after day, I studied, listened, tried to speak, and it felt like nothing was moving. I thought progress should be loud. I thought it should feel exciting. But real progress is quiet. It happens in the background. One day you understand a joke. Another day you don't need subtitles. One day you speak without planning every word, and you don't even realize when it started. I also wish I knew that English would never feel finished. I waited for a moment when I could say, "Now I know English." That moment never came. Instead, English became part of my life, something I use, not something I chase. I stopped measuring myself by fluency. I started measuring myself by comfort. Comfort speaking, comfort listening, comfort being myself in another language. I wish I knew earlier that you don't lose yourself when you speak English. You don't become less, you become more. More ways to think, more ways to connect, more ways to express who you already are. Learning English taught me patience. It taught me courage. But most importantly, it taught me that growth is not about speed. It is about staying. Staying even when it's hard. Staying even when progress is slow. And if you are still learning, still trying, still listening, you are already doing better than you think. And if you're still here, if you listened all the way to the end, thank you. That means you're serious about learning. If this episode made you feel understood or helped you see your English journey differently, don't forget to like this video. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more real, simple English like this, you can subscribe and stay with me on this journey. New episodes are coming, and we'll keep learning together, step by step.